Good afternoon and welcome to ISP Boston's first ever webinar. My name is Stephanie Galding and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. I would like to briefly introduce today's webinar team. We have with us Brian Hagopian, who is our co-moderator for the webinar, so he'll help me with facilitating questions for our speaker. Chris Brennan, who is our Young Professionals Liaison, and Catherine Tomalonis with the CAMI office. I'd also like to thank the Educational Planning Committee, the Geographic Outreach Committee, and the Chapter's Board of Directors for supporting our exploration into a webinar platform to deliver our educational content. If you're not currently a member of ISPE, we invite you to become a member, with benefits including admission to tours and other member-only events, discounts on educational programs, and free online access to all ISPE good practice guides, which are technical documents provided by subject matter experts on a variety of topics that you will find valuable in your work. We would also like to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, Commissioning Agents, Inc. Sponsorships are available for future educational programs. For more information on membership, to see our current open volunteer opportunities with the chapter or other sponsorship opportunities, we encourage you to visit the chapter's website for additional information at www.ispeboston.org. And before we actually begin the webinar and I hand things over to our speaker today, I wanted to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. So whether you're connected through a computer, desktop, or through a mobile connection, you're going to have some similar controls available as an attendee in our webinar. So you'll see these two control panels that are here. In today's webinar, we are actually going to go through and utilize a number of interactive features, which include some of the following. We are going to ask and answer poll questions during the webinar. So Wanda has some questions that she would like you to provide some input on. We are also going to share some videos provided by our speaker. We also have a couple of handouts that you will see in a little box on your control panel that is labeled handouts that you will actually be able to download as well. And then you can also ask a question to the staff by using the question panel, or if you're on the app, you can actually use the question mark that should be in the upper right-hand corner. And now I'd actually like to introduce today's speaker, Miss Wanda Sturm. Wanda is a progressive leader with 30 years of experience across the energy, financial, and high-tech sectors. She has an MBA, is a master black belt, holds certificates in change management, coaching, systems thinking, and performance management, and served on the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award Board of Examiners from 2008 to 2010. She's also the immediate past chair of the American Society for Quality's Human Development and Leadership Division, and is currently a facilitator for the Technical Communities Group 2. And I'm actually pleased, I know Wanda personally, she's also been recently appointed to the board of directors of the American Society of Quality, so that's a great accomplishment. She's currently employed as an a consultant in the energy section. I know her very well, and I look forward to hearing her talk today about managing up. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Wanda.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I am very pleased to be here. This is an exciting topic, and it's a very important topic when we talk about managing up. One of the things that I would like to do today is to actually use an acronym with you to help you remember just how to do this very easily in your role in the workplace. And I want you to consider this whether you are just considering entering the workplace, or whether you have just begun a new role, or if you're a seasoned professional. I think that this will help you as you're looking to manage up in your organization. These concepts are not difficult to understand. actually they're fairly simple to understand, but they're not always easy to execute. So let's take a look at what we're really going to talk about today. This is our agenda and our key learning objectives. What I'd like to have happen is for you to be able to gain awareness of why managing up is important and understand what it takes to create a rock star. And rock star is the acronym that we're going to use to help you be able to remember how to actually manage up well in your organization. I would like for you to be able to learn ways that you can adopt these concepts and then internalize them for action. And I want to leave a little time at the end for some self-reflection so that you can gain insight. So before we get into the Rockstar acronym, I want to really very succinctly try to define for you what does it mean to manage up. And I have two listed here that you can certainly read. One is very simple. It's engaging your manager or supervisor in productive ways. But then I did quite a bit of research, and looking at this, I really like this fully stated definition. Managing up is the process of consciously working with your boss to obtain the best possible results. And notice it's not just for your boss, but it's for yourself and for your organization. And it's a deliberate effort. So you have to be very deliberate about this and try to bring together understanding and cooperation into a relationship, especially with people that many times have different opinions and different perspectives. So this comes from an article that was written by Dr. Thomas Zuber and Dr. Erica James, and it was an article in the Family Practice Management called Managing Your Boss. And it's very interesting. There was another comment that they had in their article that I think is very pertinent to today's discussion, and it is managing your boss begins with an understanding of the value of the relationship, which has been described as a mutually dependent existence between two fallible individuals. So kind of to summarize that up is you've got to really be clear about what's important about the relationship. What is the value of that? And it needs to be mutually dependent. And so you need to be depending on one another. So it's not just one or the other, but it takes two, so to speak. So before we get into this a great deal more, what I want to do is do our first polling question. And I think KT's going to help us with that. If you are in a room and there are several of you, then you can briefly talk among yourselves and see if you can come to an answer together, or you can
And Wanda, that poll is up and posted. So as Wanda indicated, if you guys wouldn't mind answering the question that you see on your screen, which is what one work relationship is critical to achieving a positive impact to you in your career, and we'll give you a few minutes to get in your responses. Okay, so
what kind of results do we have?
I was going to say, it looks like the majority of the responses went for your immediate manager. We did have a few for peers, and a select few for none of the above.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look at the one, for those of you that responded, your immediate manager, and that's what we're going to focus on during the session today. But certainly, these other relationships are very critical to you in your career. But let's look at, like, why would we really want to manage up? And let's just consider being in the know about that. So the first and foremost reason is that it has an incredible impact to you personally. It impacts these four things that are listed here on the screen and the work that you actually do. You know, what is it that you actually do? And what potential does that afford you? Is there a way that managing up can help you advance your career? I think one of the things that very interesting about this is a key impact about this is happiness on the job. And so, how happy are you when you're at work? You know, there's a saying that's used many times that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I wonder how many of you feel that way. You know, from personal experience, I can tell you that is absolutely the truth. I've had jobs that I was very unhappy in, and a lot of times it had to do with who the manager was or how our relationship was. Other times, I've been extremely happy in the work that I was doing, and it puts you in a position of wanting to even do more. And you really doesn't feel like work. You really feel like you're doing something that is important, and you feel like you are delivering something that is critical to the success not only of the company but yourself and those people around you. And that's really about that whole managing up thing. If you think back to our definition, it's about not only helping your manager and your organization, it's about helping yourself as well. So being aware, knowing how important managing up is one way to begin to think about this as we move to the next step, which is actually understanding. So we have a foundation in knowing what it means. So we looked at the definitions. We are aware how it impacts us personally, and we can begin to understand how we can embark on this journey to be able to manage up. And to do this, I mentioned back at the beginning that we were going to have an acronym, and the acronym is ROCKSTAR. So let's see what we can employ to help us actually do this. So I mentioned that I did quite a bit of research on this topic, and I've had years of experience, lots of different managers, lots of different levels of managers that I have worked for, and trying to bring all that together in something to help really understand what does it really mean. I watched some videos, and there were a lot of commonalities in much of the literature that's out there. And there was an article by Leah McLeod about building trust with your manager. And in her article, it included a parenthetical that said, make him look like a rock star. And for some reason, that really resonated with me. And it led me to thinking about all these different key elements that are needed to make your manager a rock star. So I want to introduce the acronym to you. And in the next several slides, what we're going to do is we're going to go deeper into each one of these, into how to go about actions that's going to enable these 8 points that are here. And it's interesting because you can look at knowledge, for example. It comes in many forms. And we'll briefly touch on how to bring together the ROC part, the relationship, the observation, and the communication, and create that knowledge that will enable the STAR. In looking at the STAR, I'm going to touch on briefly a couple of those. And very interestingly, trust is not only the foundation of a team, it's basically the foundation of any relationship. And we're going to look at different types of trust and determine what type of trust you would like to have with your manager when you're managing up. So in this next area, we're going to talk about how to adopt this and gain some ability. And so that's where we're going to go into a little more depth on each of these topics. So if you remember, we're going to start out with ROC and the R is relationship. And now I would like to have our second polling question, if KT will help us with that. And it's going to ask, how would you rate your relationship with your immediate manager? And it's on a scale of great to poor.
And again, Wanda and attendees, the poll is open, and we ask that you go ahead and submit your answer in. And I think we've got most of the responses in. So looking at the responses, we actually probably have, Wanda, about a 50-50 split between people saying their relationship with their immediate manager is great and 40% saying it's good. And then there's another portion that indicate that their relationship is just kind of okay.
Okay. I'm not real surprised by that. I think I wish that we could all be talking at the same time and have some conversation about this. It's interesting from the standpoint of those of you who have great relationships. It would be good to hear how you felt like you built those. What I want to tell you about is just one of the key things to building that relationship is just initiating a conversation and keeping that conversation casual. You want to be confident and you want to be positive. So a few things to just keep in mind. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, so to speak. So you need to think about being patient. Being patient is very key when you're building a new relationship. I do some personal coaching here at work, and I was meeting with Coach E this morning, one of the managers, and we were talking about how to have the right kind of patience to interact and work with different types of people, and to make sure that you're listening rather than doing all the talking. And so that's another thing that's real important, is that whole active listening skill. You need to be able to pick up on different interests and find some commonality with your manager. You know, that whole point about paying attention, watching what they say and do, and we're going to talk about observation next, but the more that you can pay attention and see what works for your manager and be able to verbalize that yourself, then you'll be able to figure out what actions and what kind of interactions you need to be having to build that kind of relationship that you want. You can ask questions, and inquiry is huge. And matter of fact, there's all kind of training and books and everything around inquiry and asking the right type of questions and trying to find out what the expectations are. So let me just kind of lay out a few questions that you may want to ask. So one question would be, what is the most important achievement for this current role that I'm in? Another thing, a lot of times when you're talking to your manager, is find out what are their career goals. You may want to find out what is the most important thing that your manager really cares about. I know a couple of times I've used the question to talk to my manager about what can I do to help make you more successful. That's a learning. It's like now I work at a small consulting organization, smaller consulting organization, and I've been on contract at a oil and gas company now since 2010. And in doing that, one of the things that I found is talking to the people that I'm working with, using some of those consulting questions, even though the role I'm playing is not as a true consultant, really helps sometimes. So even though you're not a consultant and that's not what you want to be when you grow up, using those type questions can be very helpful. So what can you do to help make your manager successful? What's one thing that I could do different? A lot of times you can find out a lot of good information if you just ask that one question. You can find out how you can change your behavior or change your work delivery or change your approach to work that may make you more effective. What do you need to really know about your manager's work and management style? So one of the things in today's world, because everything is so technology driven, you want to ask that question. Do you expect me to be available 24/7? Do you expect me to answer emails on the weekends? What's your expectations? I know when I first went to work, the work that I initially did, I felt like I could do it while I was at the office and I could leave and go home and, go back the next day. As I grew in my responsibilities and in the type of work that I did, I found that I ended up, and especially before having any family, is I would spend a lot of time just working. It's like I would work all the time. It got to a point that my mother even approached the subject with me and said, "Are you becoming a workaholic?" So it's one of those things like, what is the expectation? I'm not sure anyone expected that, but it was in the environment I was in. That's what I felt like I needed to do, was be available all the time. Is that really an expectation? And you need to find that out, because if that's not what you want to do, then you need to find an organization where you'll be able to have your personal values as well as meet the expectations of the business. So, what was your boss's previous job? You may want to find out, kind of where did they come from? How did they get to the position that they're in? What's their career progression that they've had? Is there something like that that you can follow, or that would be of interest to you, to help you know where you can go next and what you would like to do? And how do they like to get feedback? If you have that kind of relationship with your manager where you can provide them feedback, then finding out how they would like to have it is very critical. I know with certain people that I have worked with before, and even peers, it's like a lot of times different ones prefer feedback in different ways. And so you want to make sure that you are not putting a distance between you and that person, but you're actually building that relationship by the feedback that you provide. Uh, ask your manager, what do you value in the job? What do you value most in your direct reports? And another thing, to really get to know people on a personal level, it's important to ask them what matters most outside of work to you. If you can find that out, a lot of times you can find some common ground to build some relationships. I know that because I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of different places, as I interact with people that are from different parts of the country or different countries even, you can begin to build some basis of relationship just based on geography. And by saying that, oh, I had an opportunity to live there, what was what do you like most about that place? It's all about building that relationship from a common foundation and trying to find out what that is. So the power of observation is critical to help reinforce the relationship that you're building. So I want to talk about this using your senses, and this is especially difficult if it's virtual. So we'll talk about the virtual aspect of this in a moment, because I'm not able to see any one of you. I can't smell any one of you. I can hear some of you when you're unmuted. There's no opportunity for me to get that human touch. And then taste. I mean, it's like, how would you use that anyway? So let's think about this and using your senses. When when you're interacting with your manager, it would be very interesting to spend some time thinking through these questions. So what actions do you actually see them doing? So what aromas do you smell? So if your manager, if you're there with them, and do they have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea? Do they have, I don't know, some special scent in their office or in their work area? Is there something that gives you a hint as to who that person is? What do you actually hear? So what words are used? How are they used? Are they a person, and when you start talking about touch, are they someone that's sitting there fiddling with a pen and paper? Are they touching their keyboards, their computers? Are they sitting there and then actually paying close attention to you and not really having other involvement. So that whole thing about what's being touched is a thing to consider. That's one of the things virtually that we have to be concerned about because, we could have had a polling question. We don't have one, but we could have had one of how many of you are multitasking while we're doing this, right? That happens all the time at work. So something is constantly being touched and trying to figure out what's really more important. Is it more important to be working on something else while you're trying to listen to one thing? Those are all kind of senses that you can observe and see what's going on if you have the observation to physically see the people. You can hear when things are being done, and you can also, on the phone, and in instances like this where we have WebEx, hearing is critically important because the sound that comes across and the tone of voice really makes a difference. So if someone is very short, then you may think, oh, they're in a hurry. They don't have time for this right now. If someone is really gruff, then it may come across that they're not interested in hearing anything that you have to say. They're only interested in delivering their opinion. There's all types of different things that you can listen for and inflections and tones of voice. And I know that's one of the points of feedback that many times you receive is people will hear things a certain way, and that may not be the way that it was meant. And so that's why it's so important to clarify and confirm and have good communication, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But the other thing is when you talk about taste, it's not that, so you just need to think about what flavors come to mind. Have you ever thought about that with a person? Like you meet them and you're just like, oh, they are just, the most happy, go lucky person. It's just like a field of strawberries. So you kind of get the strawberry feeling. Or is it that someone is always got a poor attitude and the flavor that comes to mind is lemon? It's different things. So use your senses and think about it. And then what will that tell you about the person, and what will it tell you about how you can better build that relationship? It may seem odd to think about it this way. And when I was putting this together, I was like, either people really gravitate to this and think this can really help them, or you'll think that's kind of a bunch of bunk. But I think one of the things that really helps is like there are managers around me that I don't specifically work with all the time, but I started trying to do this, and I started trying to look at what actions do I see. I see them, I can pick one person. I see them particularly in a hurry always. They're running from meeting to meeting. They've always got a coffee cup in their hand, and they're always drinking coffee because they've got so much on their plate. It's just one of those things that just reminds me that, oh, maybe one way I could get them to spend some time and talk with me is to offer let's get together for a cup of coffee. What are you hearing? You can hear them, the way that they speak to other people. And I try to listen for that to understand exactly what are they asking for? Do they like a lot of details? Would they prefer to have a summary? Would they prefer to have a big picture and then have it drilled down? Would they prefer to start with the details and then expand out to the bigger picture? Listening to what they're saying and what they're asking from others, not necessarily from you, but from other people, is really helpful. And then back to that, what's being touched, what's distracting them, what is right there physically that's impeding maybe the opportunity to get to know them better, or what seems to be most important to them. And then the flavors, what flavor is it that really comes to mind? If someone's in a rush all the time, and then you think about, what's a rushing kind of flavor, or you think about fast moving water, and so maybe it's a taste of a certain kind of water that comes to mind. And so you think about, okay, so how can I help tame that, so that I can have the time that I need with this manager to be able to build that relationship. So that's how you can use it. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to listen for the why and how of communications. And we've got a 3-minute video. I hope that you find this interesting. And I'm going to Okay, so I hope from that you were able to take away some points, and then hopefully it reinforced some other points that we've already covered. So the whys and the hows of communication, it's critical. Be sure, I cannot emphasize enough, clarifying and confirming your understanding. Clarifying to make sure that you know what was really said, and confirming so that you can play back exactly what you think is expected of you. So many times at work, we don't do that. We make assumptions. We assume we understand what we're supposed to do when someone gives us some direction. And I find that has created more uh, lost productivity than a lot of other things in the workplace, is just not confirming what it is you're supposed to be doing, or clarifying and making sure that that you're clear about what's really expected. So the communication and is feeding very well into the next part, which is knowledge. And with that, I want you to know that information plus data and the relationship that you have, the observation that you've made, and the communication, all of that together creates knowledge. So you take the information and data from those three things that we've already talked about, the ROC, the relationship, the observation, and the communication, and then you put that together with data, and then you get knowledge. And that knowledge is going to help you be able to interact better and build a better relationship with your manager. So to kind of give you another example, you need to observe how others interact with the manager that you're trying to manage up. So notice, do they do one-on-ones? Do they one-on-one meetings? Do they have a way that you can get to know them? Is there some type of discussion that can be held? You know, if you watch and observe how others interact with a person, then you'll be able to see that, okay, typically they like to have a one-on-one meeting in their office, and they like for you to bring some type of written communication to be able to share with them, some kind of written document so that they can see what it is that you're talking about. Once you pull those all together, then what you can say is you've got better knowledge now of how to have an effective interaction with your manager, and you can plan for that. So think about it. You've observed your manager, how they like to have meetings, what they like to have available in those meetings. You've observed them, and you know kind of what's important to them. And then from a communication standpoint, if you've asked for specifics about what is desired, then you know that information and you can pull that all together. And then that really gives you the knowledge that you need in order to have an effective interaction with this manager. So the next thing I want to talk about then is we're going to move into the STAR. So we've covered the rock part, and now we're moving into STAR. So it was relationship, observation, communication, and knowledge. And now we're going to start on the STAR with solutions. So I don't know, how many of you have ever heard, don't bring a problem without a solution? I had a manager that actually drove me nuts with the saying, if you're going to take a brick out, then you've got to put a brick back in. So it would be something like this. If you take him a problem, saying that was your brick and you're trying to take it out, then what was going to be your solution to help seal that back up, to make it a full wall again? So there's different ways that you can do that. And one thing is, if you've got a problem and you're trying to come up with a solution, use some of the tools available to help you be able to do that. Some very simple tools like the 5 whys or a fishbone diagram, or something to kind of get to what's really causing the problem so that you can begin to look for a solution that could work. You want to be sure to highlight the issue or the problem and then tell the manager what you've done and propose your solution. So let me give you an example about this. So there's misalignment between stakeholders on a key project, and you've discovered, gee, we've never had all the stakeholders in the room to discuss the direction and the path forward. So you request to establish a meeting with an agenda to cover the critical topics. You hold the meeting, you receive additional feedback to clear the path forward, and now you're moving forward with the project to engage those who will use the new process and the supporting tools. So it's very interesting. This is a very simplified example, but we just had this recently in one of the projects that I'm working on. We had a huge misalignment between our stakeholders, and we did discover, gee, we had never gotten everybody together. We were looking at, so what's causing the misalignment? Why are people not on the same page? Why are they not understanding the same issues? And how are we going to get them to come together to understand what their role is and what needs to happen? And it seems so very simple, and it seems like, why wouldn't you think to do this? But in taking the problem to the project manager is, we've got this issue, we cannot get alignment. So here is one solution that we can try, is we can try to bring everybody together and have a clear agenda about why we're having this meeting, and to pull together additional feedback from them so that we can get everyone aligned and get on the same page. So that actually, like I said, it did work. The project is moving forward, and now what we're learning is we need to stay engaged with those people and make sure that they are up to speed on every step along the way, so that they are supporters and champions for the new process and the new tool that we're going to implement. But this was critical in terms of managing up, to make sure that the manager understood the need to get the stakeholders together, and why it was critically important, and why their role in that specific meeting was critically important. So you come up with a solution, and that's when you're putting the brick back in. So you take a brick out, you put a brick in. You have a problem, you bring a solution. So, and you don't have to have a lot of solutions, you just have to have some solutions. The next letter is T, and that's for trust. So let's think about that. I told you we'd talk about the trust pyramid and how important it is. So let's look at just some brief definitions for each of these. Contractual, it's the lowest level of trust. Here what happens is you typically rely on rules or company policies or manuals. You may refer to your job title or your job description. Things you may hear is, it's not my job. And it could also refer to contractual arrangements. I should be at work at 9 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. Individuals may refer to employee rights and union or work council agreements. It's interesting because that is a level of trust, and there is trust in those rights and in those councils and the agreements that are there. Email correspondence is typically higher during contractual trust, and you have less face-to-face communication. The other thing that happens a lot of times is the CC list on emails gets really long, and more and more people are added into the email thread. It makes it sometimes just contractual trust between people then is much more political, and you get other people involved that don't necessarily need to be involved. But it is a form of trust. But let's see what would happen if we could build conditional trust with our manager. Then this is where you have more tolerance for each other, and you build verbal agreements. And this is more around, if you do this, then I'll do this. It's unwritten contracts and agreements, and the thing is that there'll be good cooperation as long as both parties do what they're supposed to do. So as long as you and your manager do what you're supposed to do in the relationship that you've built around this conditional trust, then that will continue. There is some unity and there's some teamwork associated with it, so you may find yourself working with your manager to accomplish certain things, but typically there may be, or there could be, some conditions that are attached. If you look at cooperative trust, then this is where you're really working together. There may be small problems or small disagreements, but you typically kind of move through any bumps in the road very easily. There may be some minor problems. One of the things is the more passionate you are, the more passionate that your manager is about certain things, then that can elicit some problems. But you're really, if it were a team setting, you would be kind of like norming. You would be achieving your objectives. And so as an individual, you are having your needs met. There's you feel like in relation to the skill sets that you have and the responsibility that you have, that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you feel confident with that and confident with the manager feels that way about you. And so as you're building this trust, then you're feeling like the trust keeps growing with that manager because you're meeting your objectives, and then you are actually given some kind of recognition or reward that you have been cooperating and doing what was required. And so that's an excellent level of trust to have with a manager, that they can depend on you and you can depend on them. Unconditional is total trust, and this is where, gee, if my boss loses, I lose too. If I lose, my boss loses. It's when you are willing to go above and beyond and do extra. It is a lot of times. So now, back in the contractual, if that's the type of trust you have with your manager, you do a lot of emails back and forth. But when you get to this unconditional part, there is very little email, and you use more one-on-one communications, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone. And then you'll be able to help your manager out when they need help, and they will be there for you when you need help. And so with this, and trust is very personal, but at the same time, you've got to have that trust to be able to create this rock star, right? You've got to have that. You've got to build that relationship, and that relationship needs to be based or found on a foundation of trust, and that's critically important. So let's do another polling question about what type of trust do you have with your manager?
So KT's got that poll open. So again, if attendees wouldn't mind going ahead and answering that. And also, as we're coming near to the end of our webinar, if you've got questions, feel free to go ahead and type those into our Q&A box, and we'll get to those in a few minutes. So those results are starting to come in. Looks like the majority are reporting cooperative trust. So it looks like just over 50% it rated as cooperative. About a third of the folks rated unconditional trust, which I think is awesome. And then there's a smaller population that have conditional trust.
That's awesome. Those are really great results. And I think, just moving from that cooperative to the unconditional, I think you can do that. I think by building this relationship, having that knowledge that you need, and then continuing to build that trust, delivering things on time, but then it gets to that point of where, what else can you take on? What else can you do? And, that was in the video as well, was the question, what of the things that you're working on can I take on? So that's where that trust is being built there. And then the second question, polling question, is then just a yes, no question. Are you satisfied with the type of trust that you have, or would you like to, if your answer is yes, then you're good to stay where you are. If the answer is no, then you want to move up the pyramid.
Yep, so we've got some answers coming in. Okay. Yeah, we still got a few more rolling in. But Wanda, actually, it is looking like, at least initially, that it is leaning towards people are not satisfied with their trust level, so they do want to move up that pyramid.
Well, that's good. And so hopefully some of these things that we've talked about in here will help you be able to do that.
Yeah, well, so it actually evened out a little bit with about a 50-50 split. So my guess is those people that were at the top are pretty happy with that. But there are About
Yep.
40% of the folks that would like to change that.
Yep. So that's awesome. Those of you that have more conditional and cooperative trust at levels at this point, you can certainly move to that unconditional level. And those of you at unconditional will want to stay there. There's no doubt about that. That's very important. So we'll move on to the A in STAR, which is anticipate. So, you know, it's very hard sometimes to understand and identify what your manager needs. So what really makes your manager tick, or what really irritates your manager, is the opposite of that. If you can figure those things out, you'll be definitely set to help move that trust up, and you'll be able to have a greater relationship with your manager. You know, one of the roles in an organization, and it was much more, I think, prevalent in the past than it is today, is that some of the executive assistants that I've known are the very best at this. They know their managers' ins and outs. And, you know, one of the questions to find out is, how can you gain this insight? So if you go back to your observations that you have of your manager, are you seeing any patterns? Are there certain requirements that are specified? Find out, do they really like data? What data would be useful in your next interaction with your manager, and can you find and get it to your manager before they ask? So thinking about some of that continues to build some of that trust too, about getting your obligations met, but then going above and beyond. So, you know, things have changed quite a bit over time, but one piece of advice I was given starting in my career was, when presenting to upper management, leave them some questions to ask. Don't tell them every detail. Otherwise, you'll get caught without some potential knowledge. So, you know, that was very interesting advice then. And in today's world of transparency, it's pretty different. So you may not want the slides that you have that you show if you're presenting, because this was when I was presenting to managers, is you may not want them to include all the details, but what you really want to do is you really want to tell a story that's going to leave the audience wanting to know more. And you need to consider that for your managers. So what can you anticipate that your manager will need to know to make a decision? What will they need to know to provide the right kind of guidance? What do they need to know to engage with the customer? What's critical for them in terms of information that you have available to you that you can set them up for success? So one thing you want to make sure is that you never let your manager be blindsided. Never let them be blindsided. You want to keep them informed. So if you're interacting with another part of the organization and there's someone that has some issues with what's going on and your manager hasn't heard about it, you want to be sure and share that information with them so that they can execute whatever type of action they need to mitigate anything going wrong with the direction that you're trying to take. So I think anticipating what your manager needs is another great way to help you build the trust. It helps you use the knowledge that you've gained. It helps you go back to your observations, and it all fits together so that based on this relationship that you have, the communication that you have, then you're able to continue to move forward. So the last one is the R, which is responsibility. So this is where we're just going to talk about under promise and over deliver. Understand what your manager's goals are and take the responsibility to align and to honor their time and share with them how to best use your talent, skills, and competencies. What you need to do is take accountability to help the manager achieve the organizational mission and to feel ownership for that. One of the things that you can do to help you out is to really adapt to their communication style. So watch how they communicate, and if you can adapt to that, that's very helpful. I'm not asking you to change how you communicate, but to adapt to their style so that you're more effective in engaging with them. One important important thing is do not embarrass your boss in front of other people. That's a kind of a no-brainer, but it's good to be reminded of that. And then be sure to prioritize and prioritize what's important in terms of important to your manager so that you're delivering the right things on time and taking responsibility for those things that are yours to be responsible for. So with that, the idea is that you can take this and make it yours, and I know we're about at time. So to manage up, you want to internalize this information, and so you want it to become second nature. So the more you exercise managing up, the more it will, and the more you'll be managing up unconsciously on occasion. And so you'll find that this just becomes second nature. You'll determine how best for you to build a relationship, how to observe the behaviors and what's really going on around you, how to communicate effectively, how to bring those together to develop knowledge about your manager and what makes him tick. You will think about bringing solutions when you encounter a problem, how you can continue to build trust, and you'll begin to anticipate certain aspects based on your observations, your relationship, your communication, and knowledge. And I got those out of order. It's relationship, observation, communications, and knowledge. And then what you'll be doing is taking responsibility by under-promising and over-delivering. So the key to this is really practice, practice, practice. It will help make it very personal for you. The other thing that we have is I'm leaving you with a self-assessment. It's a simple yes or no. If you have any no's, that's a gap in creating a rock star from your manager. So what you want to do is take this now and then take it again in 6 months and see if you have some improvements. If you already have all yeses, then the question is, are there any areas where you can improve or it could become more natural, and then highlight those for yourself and try to address it over the next 6 months to see if it makes any difference. So this is the self-assessment. This is what it looks like. It is one of the handouts. And we have a final closing polling question. What is your level of confidence that you can begin to create a rock star? And you're creating a rock star out of your manager because you are now aware, you understand, you can adopt this and internalize it so that you can have a relationship, observation, communication, knowledge, solutions, trust, anticipate, and responsibility.
Perfect. And KT's got that poll open again. So again, we encourage our attendees to go ahead and answer that question, as well as I will put another call out. And if you've got any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box so that we can go ahead and take it, as many of those as we can. So KT's gone ahead and closed the poll for us, Wanda, and the majority of folks, about 70% actually, have said that their confidence is pretty high that they can begin to create a rock star. We've got about another 20% feel very confident, and then there's a couple of folks that maybe aren't so confident, so maybe they've got a few other questions that we can tackle here, at the end.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, any questions?
So with that, we'll go ahead and close out that poll and open it up to attendees to ask questions. I know, Wanda, before I give people a moment to type anything in, and for attendees, if for some reason you type in a question and we can't get an answer while we're still online, we can certainly get the answers emailed back out to the attendees. And also, please keep in mind as you're asking these questions that the only person that can actually see who's asking what question is our organizer, is KT. So you really are asking your questions pretty anonymously. So we encourage you to ask any question that really is on your mind. And there were two that kind of popped into my head, Wanda, as I was listening to you speak, that I think are probably pretty relevant to most of the folks within the ISP Boston chapter. Is, would these principles, do you think these principles would apply if you're in, say, a project manager role versus dealing with your immediate boss? Right? So we've got a lot of folks who do project management. Would these same kind of principles work with, say, a project sponsor?
Yeah, I think so. You may want to, change some of the questions that you ask when you're engaging and building that relationship. But building the relationship, observing what's important to that sponsor, uh, having clear communication with them, pulling all that together and building some type of knowledge around that person is going to be critical regardless of what role it is, right?
Yep.
Then when you move into the star part, it's going to be critical to have the have a sense of trust with that person and be sure that everyone's clear on the roles and responsibilities and accountabilities that are there. So
Yep.
I would say that it's very important to continue that, kind of looking through the different aspects of Rockstar to be able to continue to build that relationship with that person.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I know that we're at time, and I don't necessarily want to impede on our attendees' afternoon. So I would like to go ahead and thank Wanda for taking the time to talk with us about how to better manage up today. Today's presentation slides will be available via the ISP Boston website, and a link to the recording will be included in the follow-up email. To get automatic notifications about future webinars, you can follow our LinkedIn page, subscribe to our blog, or sign up from the monthly sign up for emails by contacting the ISP Boston office directly. We'd also really appreciate it if you took the short survey regarding today's webinar, which will be included in our follow-up email. And the survey allows us to improve the quality of upcoming webinars and better meet your needs. Again, we appreciate all of the attendees' time. We hope you have a good afternoon. And again, thank you, Wanda. We do appreciate your time as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.